I call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, January 13th, 2022. We are meeting electronically in accordance with Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021, Subdivision 1, which is due to the pandemic and the fact that we have made the determination that it is not prudent or feasible for us to be in our public space or have the public join us there. All applicable portions of the open meeting law are being followed. We have a requirement of taking all votes by roll call in this setting. With that in mind, I will do a roll call on attendance. Manager Sando?
Here.
Manager Loftus?
Here.
Manager Maxwell?
Here.
Manager Miller is not here. Manager Olson?
Here.
Manager Hejmati?
Here.
And Manager White is here. Thank you. Is there any member of the public here who wishes to address the board on a matter that is not on the agenda? I think I only saw Mr. Yelsey. Okay.
That's right, President White. There's nobody else in our digital space here.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So
Maxwell, second.
I will take Manager Sando's motion, Manager Maxwell's second, voting then on approval of the agenda. Manager Hejmati.
Aye.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell.
Aye.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Sando.
Aye.
And Manager White votes aye. The agenda is approved. We have one information item this evening, which is the introduction of a new staff member by Mr. Whisker.
Thank you, President White and Board of Managers. I'm extremely pleased this evening to be able to introduce you all to Kayla Westerlund, the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District's new permitting manager. I sent out some bio information about Kayla, so I won't go through all that again, but she does join us with a very strong environmental background and great leadership experience, and has just through the interview brought tremendous amount of enthusiasm and optimism about this work that really resonated with us. So I wanted to welcome Kayla this evening and give her a moment to say a few words and introduce herself to all of you.
Welcome, Kayla.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's my fourth day at the district, and I'm thrilled to be here. I've been working in the green industry in some capacity for over a decade, mostly in sustainable landscape design. I was most recently managing a team of landscape designers at Bachman's, and I've just been really impressed so far in these couple of days with the team at the district. Everyone is very driven, collaborative, and also welcoming. And I can't wait to get started on some of the key initiatives with my team, like the rule revisions and the new compliance policy. And yeah, I've been really enjoying the new permit portal and all the great new things. So hello, everyone.
Oh, welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, Kayla.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing going ahead. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kayla.
On the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes of the December 16th, 2021 board meeting and the check registers for the general checking account, surety checking account, and wire transfers, which we have on our agenda tonight because we've been 4 weeks since we had a meeting. We'll also have it on the next agenda. We also have resolutions. 2201 is approval of the district's funds depository. 22-2 is approval of the district depository of non-cash financial assurances. 22-3 approval of the official district newspaper, and 22-4 approval of the district fee schedule. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Hejmati.
Manager Hejmati moves. Is there a second?
Second, Loftus.
Thank you, Manager Loftus. Voting then on the consent agenda. Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Sando.
Aye.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Hejmati.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye. The consent agenda is approved. Note that we have, board updates. I do have a few things to say after 4 weeks away. I hope that everyone had some time to relax and let your hair down with friends and family. And I certainly, my heart goes out to everyone whose households have COVID right now. There certainly are a lot in our community that are faced with that. I have had some meetings in this 4 weeks of time. Manager Maxwell, Manager Hejmati, and I met up with the 325 Lake Road liaisons. We got an update and we were able to thank and say goodbye to outgoing Councilmember Rick Browse and thank him for the work he has done. And then Manager Miller and I joined staff in meetings with some newly elected Minneapolis council members and NPRB commissioners. Looking forward to working with those organizations going ahead. And Mr. Whisker and I have met with some county commissioners and have some more scheduled. So it has been busy despite the fact that it's time off, so to speak. Manager Loftus, would you give a report from Operations and Programs Committee?
Yes, thank you, President White. We, the committee had the second of a series of discussions about our climate action framework, and staff led a very interactive discussion, and we worked on clarifying our roles and looking at different stakeholders' lenses towards this issue, and we will continue to work on our climate action framework and focus, and I believe it'll come back in a couple months. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there other meetings or events the managers would like to report on? Then note that the upcoming meetings and event schedule is printed in the agenda. Manager Loftus is assigned to attend the January 18th Metro Mod meeting, and Manager Maxwell the January 19th CAC meeting. We will otherwise be having board and committee meetings on January 27th and February 10th. That said, we move to the next business item, which is permit 21113, presented by Ms. Barlow.
Screen check, is that good for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. Happy after the fact holidays. This presentation is for District Permit 21113, the City of Sherwood Smithtown Ponds Drainage Project. This permit meets all applicable district rules and is before you this evening based on public request. In tonight's presentation, I will provide an overview of the project, analysis of how the project meets district rules, and then finally staff's recommendation. The City of Sherwood, who is in attendance in the audience tonight, is proposing a series of stormwater retention and treatment ponds to address area drainage and flooding issues. The project is within the upper watershed at large, and it ultimately drains to Lake Minnetonka, specifically East Upper Bay. There we go. The project is located adjacent to Freeman Park, directly south of Smithtown Road. There are a handful of past district projects within the greater Sherwood area, sneaking into Excelsior as well, as you guys can see, or as everyone can see on their screen. But there's nothing that's in the immediate vicinity. And here is the parcel itself with some of the necessary roadway landmarks to help locate it within the City of Sherwood. The highlighted triangle is associated with the specific address for the project, but it should be noted that the project area itself will extend immediately to the south side of the Minnetonka Regional Trail. Within this portion of Sherwood, runoff from surrounding neighborhoods flows through the project area and exits underneath Smithtown Road through the Grant Lorenz Channel, again with Lake Minnetonka as the ultimate downstream water body. Drainage in this area is conveyed through either storm sewer or through intermittent existing channels. Those that are important to the area and to this presentation are Freeman Park Channel, Pebble Creek, and again, Grant Lorenz Channel as that outlet point. An existing outlet control structure exists underneath the Minnetonka Trail that currently allows Freeman Park Channel and area drainage to move underneath the trail and then continue towards its ultimate outlet point. Some important features to note would be Strawberry Lane. Strawberry Lane, which is proposed to undergo utility and road improvements in the coming years, and will be referenced throughout this presentation, as well as just the southern and western Strawberry Lane and Sherwood Oaks neighborhoods. The highlighted boxes just give an approximation of where these neighborhoods exist in comparison to the project area. Underneath this current drainage pattern, heavy storm events have resulted in localized flooding within the western and southern neighborhoods, as well as neighborhoods downstream of the project area, and erosive flows and bank failures within those mentioned channels. The specific photos that are seen on the screen are from the Grant Lorenz Channel, which again is just the ultimate outlet point for this area. In order to address these issues, the city of Sherwood purchased the Smithtown Road parcel with the express intent of constructing stormwater ponds to provide rate and quality in order to address upstream and downstream flooding and then correct the erosive flows. Currently, the parcel is predominantly forested. It contains some remaining hardcover from some previous light development. Freeman Channel flows through the parcel, and the area contains some drainage features that are delineated as wetlands, and they're mostly associated with the channel itself. These wetlands were field delineated. They don't appear on any district or national wetland inventory maps, but they are present. The pond system itself will consist of 3 connected ponds and a new outlet control structure underneath the trail. And the pond system will also include what's referred to as an iron enhanced sand filter to provide nutrient treatment. The new outlet control structure will allow for alternating flow patterns between Freeman Park, the Freeman Park Channel, and then the ponding system. And the flow between those two areas will change based on the intensity of different storm events. And I'll touch on that in more detail a bit later in the presentation. Finally, new trails connecting Smithtown Road down to Minnetonka Trail and then into Freeman Park are proposed as a part of the project. The remainder of the parcel that isn't going to be trail or pond will stay vegetated. In conjunction with the ponds, the drainage project proposes to alter some sections of existing stormwater conveyance in order to meet the necessary rate and flow needs. The footing drain system that currently exists within the southern Sherwood Oaks neighborhood is going to be disconnected from the city storm sewer, and then a new connection will be made directly into the ponding system with the goal of mitigating flooding potential for the homes within that area. Runoff from the Strawberry Lane neighborhood currently is outletted to Pebble Creek, and that's how it gets to the drainage area. That outlet will be disconnected from Pebble Creek, and the drainage from that neighborhood will also be tied directly into the ponding system. Finally, in the future, the city of Sherwood is proposing to make some utility enhancements along Strawberry Lane that's going to result in an increase in impervious. That increase is going to be tied directly into the system, but just as a point of clarification, that item is not part of this current permit proposal. That is something that's on the docket to come for the city, but it's being considered when sizing these current basins. This project does have a range of components. So as a brief summary before I move into the rule analysis portion, the city of Sherwood is proposing to construct a new ponding system. It's going to consist of 3 separate ponds, 2 referred to as Smithtown ponds, and then that Freeman Park basin to the south side of the trail. The ponding system will contain an iron enhanced sand filter in order to filter out phosphorus. And the outlet control structure that exists underneath the trail connecting the 2 areas will be replaced as well. The project will take on Sherwood Oaks and Strawberry Lane runoff and is also being sized to incorporate future Strawberry Lane improvements. With those kind of construction changes. Drainage changes in the area will include reduced storm flows and erosive events through Grant Lorenz Channel, Pebble Creek, and Freeman Park Channel. And putting these ponds online within the area will result in the addition of storage and treatment in order to meet upstream needs and reduce downstream flows. Before I move into any district rules, Minnehaha Creek Watershed District serves as the local government unit for the Wetland Conservation Act within the city of Sherwood. The parcel contains 3 type 1 and type 2 wetlands. These were delineated on site, as can be seen in the image. The wetlands, as I previously mentioned, are associated with the drainage channels, and they are pretty degraded as a result of the ongoing drainage issues within Freeman Park Channel. The project proposes about 1/10 of an acre permanent wetland impact, and the district was the issuing body for the boundary and type decision and then the replacement plan under the Wetland Conservation Act. The city of Sherwood will purchase 0.2 acres of banking credit, which is the amount that's required to 2-to-1 replacement ratio under the Wetland Conservation Act. The first applicable rule is erosion control. This rule is triggered by any project that proposes to disturb more than 5,000 square feet. There is a significant amount of disturbance well over that threshold associated with this project. The images just highlight the locations of the perimeter control. The hatched areas will represent areas that will have temporary and permanent stabilization as the construction continues, ensuring that sediment isn't going to leave this site at any point. This erosion control plan does extend into the Shorewood Oaks neighborhood for when there is associated drain tile work. Next is the district's wetland protection rule. This rule is applicable for any projects that propose temporary or permanent wetland disturbance or that trigger the district's stormwater management or water body crossings and structures rule, which coincidentally, all 3 of those are applicable to this project. Wetland buffer is required as a result. Specifically 20 feet of buffer for the managed 3 wetlands that exist on the parcel. The entire parcel that isn't pond is going to remain vegetated, and this will provide the required buffer for portions of the wetland edge that aren't going to overlap with the proposed pond footprints. Again, there's about 1/10 of an acre of wetland impact associated with this project. The city of Sherwood is also proposing to include a 25-foot base buffer around all of the ponds to help revegetate the area. Next is the water body crossings and structures rule. This rule applies to any projects that propose to use the better bank of a water body, which includes, for this project, the replacement of the outlet control structure underneath Minnetonka Trail. The new outlet control structure will allow for any storm event that is greater than the 2-year storm event intensity to be routed directly into the pond system in order to get the rate and volume reduction that is required. This will allow for the decreased erosion within downstream channels. When it's not operating for any storm event that is less than that 2-year threshold, flow will continue through Freeman Park Channel as normal. District staff and district engineers have reviewed the hydraulic analysis component associated with the water body crossings and structures rule, demonstrating that replacement of the structure will not result in any negative upstream or downstream impacts. This analysis did extend into the new kind of ultimate outlet point that will be installed right before the culvert that outlets the project area underneath the road. The last applicable district rule is the stormwater management rule. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the purpose of this project is to provide a solution for channel impact and flooding issues within the drainage area neighborhoods. As such, the project doesn't necessarily represent the typical impact-driven project that is normally presented with the stormwater management rule. The construction of the ponds won't result in impervious surface that requires treatment under this rule. The proposed trails that connect Smithtown Road to the regional trail will total about 1/4 of an acre, but these trails are less than 12 feet in width and they have pervious surface on either side of them, which means they're exempt from treatment under the rule. However, with the city's intent to incorporate future Strawberry Lane improvements into this ponding system, the city of Sherwood is looking to establish this ponding system as essentially a regional treatment facility. And as such, the project was reviewed by district staff and district engineers under that specific section of the rule. As a whole, the system will provide about 13.5 acre feet of storage. The incorporation of the filter will result in about a 70% decrease in phosphorus loading, and then the desired reduction in rate, which again is a big goal of this project, will be seen for 1, 10, and 100-year storm events. Just to kind of put some ballpark for this reduction, there will be a 13% decrease in Pebble Creek for 100-year events, 50% in Freeman Park Channel for a 100-year event, and then 37% reduction in flow for Grant Lorenz Channel for a 100-year event. District staff and district engineers reviewed all the provided modeling to confirm the reductions in rate and phosphorus loading. Further, staff and engineers were able to confirm that the system would provide rate and phosphorus reductions and the amounts that are necessary to meet district rules for the approximate increase in linear surface that is associated with the Strawberry Lane improvements. Again, the city of Sherwood will have to apply for a specific erosion control and stormwater permit when they finalize those plans. But based on the current estimation of just how much that project will increase impervious surface, the way that this ponding system is being built, it should have no problem taking on that drainage. It should be noted that staff and engineers reviewed kind of an expanded submission of stormwater materials throughout the review process. Specifically, alternative phosphorus modeling was reviewed to help better quantify what that potential reduction might be. But in summary, construction of the basins as proposed does meet district requirements under the stormwater management rule. Finally, the project is before you due to public request. Specifics of the district's communication with residents can be found in the permit report within the board packet. There are people on the call tonight who might want to speak more to the issues, but to provide an initial overview, the 2 principal points of concern revolve around loss of trees and vegetation within the area and the concentrated effects of any chemicals and pesticides that might end up within the pond, as well as questions regarding the efficacy of modeled data versus measured data. The district doesn't oversee tree and vegetation removal, and our rule language doesn't explicitly address chemicals and pesticides. Further, the district does not require measured data as part of the project submittal due to the fact that it's an established engineering practice to rely on the modeling. Further, the input data and the variables that go into the various forms of modeling that the district reviews are tied back to real world data, and all of those inputs come from a variety of sources. In summary, the city of Sherwood Smithtown Pond projects is looking to provide stormwater retention and treatment in order to reduce drainage and flooding issues within the area and alleviate erosive channel flows. The project as proposed meets all criteria under the applicable district rules. The Strawberry Lane improvements that were used to size the project will require a separate permit when the plans are finalized at that time. And this project is being presented before the board due to public request. Because of this, staff recommends approval of the permit with the conditions that a maintenance agreement between the district and the city is executed for the stormwater management facilities, wetland buffers, and water body outlet structures. And then finally, the city of Sherwood should submit the documentation that they receive from the Army Corps of Engineers when that organization makes their final approval. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Barlow. Appreciate that. At this time, we will take any comments from members of the public. The process will be that each member may make a statement and then the board will turn to its considerations.
President White, it looks like Mr. Alan Yelsey has his hand raised if you'd like to recognize him first.
Thank you, Mr. Yelsey. Go ahead. You'll need to unmute. Yes, you did.
Hi, and thank you for having me. I have a bunch of things to say, and let me just give you a bit of who I am, just so you know that.
Mr. Yelsey, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is James. Could you please just begin with your name, which I think we've now said at least 2 or 3 times, but also your address in the city of Sherwood?
Sure. My name is Alan Yelsey. I'm a 40-year resident of Sherwood. My address is 26335 Peach Circle. I'm immediately to the west of the proposed Smithtown Ponds project. I've lived, as I mentioned, for 40 years in Sherwood. For the first 25 or so years, I was immediately across from what is referred to as the Grant Lorenz Channel, and I would see it every day from my living room. And so I have at least 25 years of experience with that feature, and now I'm immediately adjacent to the water issues of Western Sherwood, adjacent to the Smithtown Pond project. So I do have at least some direct experience with what we're talking about today. I want to say before I begin any comments that I do appreciate Grace's help and support. I don't agree with her on everything, but she handled this very professionally, and I appreciate that. And I also love your organization because you follow policies and principles and rules that are well stated up front rather than reactive, and you're proactive, as you mentioned earlier. And so I'm very much a supporter of the organization and the way you practice what you're doing. And I used to be a regional planner for the Metropolitan Council, so I do have some experience with what life looks like from your end of the world. So let me begin with, I'll start kind of at the high level and I'll work my way down to detail if you permit me. Number one, I did not receive a notification from your organization regarding this meeting today. So I believe it's required, or I believe you attended, to invite residents who were within 600 feet of the property to participate in the meeting. I did receive the original card, which indicated you were considering and reviewing the Sherwood permit, but I did not receive any card recently about this particular meeting or the ability of people to participate in the public hearing. So I find that if that is indeed what your practice is, I did not receive that card. Let me just stop there a moment and just see if I should have received a card or not.
Mr. Yelsey, I would like you to complete your statement entirely without back and forth.
All right, very well. So related to that is the issue of the city of Sherwood. As I've shared with you in the documentation, and to this moment, everything that it was shared is still accurate. I have not received any response from the city of Sherwood for all of my data practices requests, which are multiple ones dating back to November 16, asking for all of the submissions to your organization from the city of Sherwood. And I also requested all of the documents that were used in research, producing all of the evidence that we should have access to regarding this proposed project. So if you are going to take citizen involvement seriously, you should require, and I'd even add you must require, that the city that's proposing the permit actually let its own residents see what the project is about, look at the evidence, and receive, by law, we're required to receive the Data Practices Act information as requested in a prompt manner. And as you'll see, if you do look at the record, I have more communication that shares their failures, and I haven't shared with you, and I'd be happy to if need be in the future. But I also said that was a priority for me to have the MCWD information that was communicated to you guys before long. That was my priority, and they refused to submit that. I have not received it, and they didn't even respond to me. So I just want you to know that is inexcusable, unacceptable, undemocratic, And for an organization with integrity that does view citizens as partners in this process, you must enforce the access to information that we need in order to participate in this meeting, but also participate with information that is necessary and essential, both for our own citizenry, but also for our own needs. So number one, I'm asking you not to approve this permit on the basis of the deliberate failure of the city of Sherwood. Again, I've got all of that evidence. Some of it's presented. I think enough of it's been presented to you in the packet to suggest that they have failed to do their due diligence. And then that does not allow me and other residents. I have multiple residents who are as concerned as I am about this proposed project. So let me start with that one and say, please do not allow this permit to go through until the residents actually have a chance to review the materials that supposedly document the need for this project and the plans for this project. All we have now, and they've actually eliminated from their website all the previously accessible information. It's all gone and we cannot get it right now because I've asked for it. All we have is a technical plan for the project, which just shows the schematics for the drawings and diagrams. So number one, I oppose this project. We all do, on the basis of the fact that we have been literally blocked from accessing the very information we need to be good citizens. And for you as an organization of integrity, which you are, that should be a red flag for you if the citizens can't even get the information they need. So number one, that's my first point. And I'll continue on. If you want me just to keep going without any questions, that's fine. But I'm quite happy to take questions as I go through this.
Proceed, continue.
All right. So number two, there's a map that was in the packet, and it's this one in the packet, which shows the area that is under question, the entire watershed area of Western Sherwood. And if you're able to pull that up, that would be preferable. I think that would be easier for you to view rather than me pointing to it. But what I'd like to do is simply make a couple points regarding that map. So the next challenge to what Sherwood submitted to your permitting process is that the information is inaccurate and incomplete and non-systemic. So it doesn't deal with the entire watershed. It deals with what they picked out within their property as a small portion of the watershed. And you can't mitigate phosphorus unless you know where it's coming from. You can't mitigate phosphorus if you don't know where it's going. And by simply picking a point in the middle of the entire watershed, north and south, and saying, here's what we're going to do, and we're not going to talk about the lower area or the upper area in any detail or definition, that is also unacceptable if you're going to be a logical, honest organization in terms of practicing ecosystem protection. So what I would like to point out, if you're looking at that map, is that there are multiple stormwater ponds throughout that entire process, some man-made, some generally natural, but from the source, which is just above Highway 7, the area that has a development, newer development called Sherwood Ponds, there is a pond that receives the stormwater from that area. And there's also a watershed area that filters and accepts all of that water prior to getting to the stream that we refer to as the Freeman Creek. So prior to that, you already have a pond and a filtering system from all of the stormwater in Smithtown, get them mixed up, Sherwood Ponds, that goes north and flows ultimately into what is being referred to as Freeman Creek. And Freeman Creek then flows in a very small channel that's overgrown with weeds north towards the trail, which we've referred to. and it goes into just kind of a non-dug area. It's almost flat. And then it finds its way to the man-made development under the trail and crosses the trail underneath the trail and then continues to flow as the creek, the Freeman Park Creek. Now, I'm saying that to you because that shows that there is some natural filtering and natural sediment removal in that particular domain. And that's true for other parts of the entire watershed too that haven't been brought up. So if you want to control phosphorus, first of all, no one has measured phosphorus in the creek that I'm aware of or in the ponds. I've not seen one measure, a live measure, not an estimate, not a model, but someone showing me where there is phosphorus. And I'm happy to get phosphorus out of the system. But we all know that phosphorus actually comes from de-icing of the roads, which the city supplies. And it also comes from fertilizer, which is the Freeman Park Fields, the commercial use of fertilizer. It's not prohibited to use phosphorus. So we have the city actually producing phosphorus in large quantities, more than any resident might or any other source. So if there is a phosphorus issue, we need to get to the source of it and understand it. And we haven't measured it and we haven't looked at the sources of the phosphorus. So when you do modeling, you say, we're going to get rid of the phosphorus and we're going to build a $3 million project that may or may not be successful in removing phosphorus. It would be nice to know if we actually have a phosphorus problem before you begin doing that. So for me, that's just logical and reasonable and basic science. And basic science does not rely totally on modeling, particularly in unique situations like Western Sherwood, which is a very high water table area. The soils are different. The water table is always quite high, except in drought conditions. And when you talk about floods, rain-driven floods, that also is non-scientific. That doesn't even make sense to me. There are rain-driven floods. There are none reported in the city of Sherwood on the western edge since any record I can find. And there are reports that even during the major rains where it was recorded that 5 inches fell in 2 consecutive days, there was no significant flooding whatsoever and no mitigation was required in the Western Sherwood area. However, living in 40 years, the problem has been spring melt. And spring melt actually causes the greatest amount of erosion. And it also introduces the greatest risk to any ponding system of this scale and size, which is freezing. So if the pond is frozen, it doesn't function. And it actually can flood if it doesn't function. So no one's addressing spring melt, which is the source of the greatest flows of those streams that we've been talking about. The Freeman Creek stream, Pebble Creek, and then ultimately Grant Lorenz Channel. Those are all sourced by spring melt coming out of Freeman Park by and large and flowing into those streams. And no one is talking about the waterfall. So the water flows from Freeman Park north under the creek, under the trail, but it falls almost maybe 15 to 20 feet after it crosses and drops down. That is a source of additional pressure and water pressure and force of water that can be mitigated by removing that waterfall effect. And that would have a great impact, I think, on flow. So one of your objectives is to address flow. Well, first of all, there isn't a major flow issue. So I can tell you there's only 300 feet of, there's so much for me to share. I apologize for just running here and going really fast, but I'm going to try and cover it all as quickly as I can. So the Grant Lorenz Channel only has 300 feet where there's significant erosion. Those pictures that Grace showed you, those are just 3 houses along the creek. And I don't mean just, I do care about those homeowners, but that is erosion in very soft, rich soil. And that has been occurring for all of these years. And that's not going to be mitigated by the process you've just described. even a 100-year flood event, which doesn't produce as much flow as you might think down toward Grant Lorenz Channel, is not going to cause enormous amounts of erosion beyond what's already occurred. It's such a soft soil, it's occurring regardless, just in normal rain events and normal spring melt events. So if you want to stop those 3 houses from having erosion, that's part of your mission, if I read it correctly, is that look for local solutions and don't try to do something gigantic that is not merited, that may not work. In this case, that would be very expensive and possibly damaging. There's a local solution to that, and it actually works just 200 feet away, which is vegetation. So there's vegetation areas that are not heavily eroded, in a more concerted effort that would reduce that erosion level and also help mitigate flow. Finishing just the story of the map for a second. Again, I apologize for so much stuff here. The Sherwood Oaks project was mismanaged, and it also shouldn't have been zoned the way it was. All of these problems that we're citing, most of them at least, are due to poor zoning and poor mitigation of stormwater originally in the planning process. So we're mopping up for problems that should never have occurred. The Sherwood Oaks issue, they have 2 flows, 2 sources of water. They're sump pumps, and they also have their stormwater. The sump pumps, that's clean water, that's unpolluted water by and large, coming right out of the home, right from the ground. And that water shouldn't be mixed and put into a holding tank or holding pond for processing. It's the cleanest water you're going to find. And so if you're going to let any water flow through without any mitigation, that would be the water. And it's not going to be an intense flow. It'll be a continuous flow during the wet seasons and during the spring melt. All of us in this area have high water tables and have sump pumps that run often 3 to 4 to 5 months. And we often have standing water around us, but it's not flooding. It's due to high water table. And that's a subject that no one even addresses. So high water table is a factor in the ecology of this area. And it's not all about stormwater. It's about all of the water considerations and not just one. So I'll just kind of speed up a little bit here. The Strawberry Lane project is a boondoggle of a project in that it's now been slimmed down to a sidewalk and just repaving the road by and large. That's the plan. And that's not going to occur till 2023. There is no hurry to get this permitted. So if I raise any doubts in your mind, and I damn well better, you could indeed just put off your approval until further investigation, and I'd be happy to supply more evidence and other residents as well, and we can get access to the reports that actually prove more of what I'm saying than just what I've been able to present to you that have been withheld from me. So continuing on, the Strawberry Lane project, that's going to add some 23,000 square feet of so-called impermeable product, which is the sidewalk by and large. There's permeable sidewalks and there's permeable roads. The town of Shoreview has experimented with successfully 5 roads and multiple projects with the use of materials that are permeable, that hold up against Minnesota winters, allow water to flow through, and they don't cause the runoff issue that you see on Strawberry Lane at this time. So it isn't a given that we're going to add permeable space. It actually is a given that we're going to reduce permeable space, if impermeable space, if we use permeable materials in the Strawberry Lane project and do it for the first time in Sherwood. Other communities have done it quite consistently. The actual Sherwood Ponds, Smithtown Ponds project, I apologize, all these names get me. They already removed a home and removed that impermeable area. And so you have actually a net reduction in impermeable material in the entire area there, because that has all been reduced with the removal of that home and their basement, etc. All right, let me just finish up with the map and then I'll go on to another topic, why you should not approve this. Continuing on downstream. So once the waters, Pebble Creek, by the way, is a very small creek. It does have a little bit of erosion to it among some neighbors, but they've not been concerned about it. It's well away from their homes. And by diverting water from Pebble Creek into the alleged Smithtown Ponds project, it will be nothing. There will be hardly any flow. And no one mentions there is a holding pond for that already. That also mitigates the flow. It also serves as a filter, and it also deals with sediment. And that's one that's located right near my home that I can look at as I stare out my front door. So there is already a holding pond off of Strawberry Lane that already processes the water before it gets to Pebble Creek and before it crosses Smithtown Road. And there are others. There's 3 or 4 others that are culvert based, but they're more like large, like rain garden kinds of things that work naturally and locally to mitigate any runoff issues or any waste stormwater issues. And finally, there's a couple flat areas on Strawberry Lane where the owners have in the past complained about standing water. There is standing water throughout this entire region during spring and heavy rains. That's the high water table issue and the clay content of the soil. And you'll actually have things that look like a bayou swamp for 4 to 5 months in this area right behind Strawberry Lane. So that's not uncommon. What one can do is just a local mitigation, which is something like a rain garden to absorb that water and remove it so that's not just standing in the owner's front lawn. That's 1 or 2 reports. So while I'm right on this topic, the reports of issues with residents, water issues, are exaggerated beyond belief. And I've got a report that I've sent to you. I don't know if it got into the packet, Grace. It was the large attachment document that Sherwood did provide, and I was able to get, called the Sherwood Surface Water Management Plan, September 2018. They evaluated every home that had a problem with a major rain event earlier in the 2010s or something of that sort. And nothing required any action on the part of the city whatsoever, other than a couple modest changes to best practices. That's it. Nothing. And that was after the 2 5-inch rain events, which were close to what I would imagine a 100-year event might look like. So there is no truth, and I can prove this to you, but I've talked to the neighbors in public court hearings here and asked them, all the neighbors on Strawberry Lane, when they were all gathered, how many have had flooding issues. One had flooding issues, and it was due to high water table, not stormwater, not rainwater, not spring melt. It was just high water table during periods of time, and they did not have an adequate sump pump, and that was it. There's no other event where there's been flooding. There's no other event where there's standing water that's consistent other than due to high water table, again, not stormwater. All right, finishing up, going down to Grant Lorenz Channel now. There is actually a holding pond that was built not too many years ago on Arbor Creek Road, or Arbor Lane, that is meant to deal with any flooding. It's a higher water issue built. It was built during a development, and it was meant to filter and deal with high flow and high concentrations of water flowing down what is called Grant Lorenz Channel. Finally, for all those of you who are familiar with this, the water from Grant Lorenz Channel, which is the accumulated flow from both the Pebble Creek and the Freeman Creek, that does not flow directly into Lake Minnetonka, as you, I think, know. It goes through something close to a half mile of wetlands before it gets to an outlet to go into Lake Minnetonka. And that has worked very effectively. And thank goodness we preserved it, although development was allowed to impinge on that watershed area. So it doesn't function the way it should, but it has apparently done a very good job of mitigating that flow. And again, I'd love to see a measurement as to whether the water coming out of there and ultimately getting into Lake Minnetonka is or is not problematic due to sediment, due to contaminants, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to finish that one. I'm moving quickly. There's much more to say, but let me jump on to a couple more reasons why you should not approve this permit. So my point that I just went all through is, A, you haven't gotten the information to understand the entire watershed properly from the city. They haven't shared that with us. The measurements that give you the sound science of what's going on have not been introduced and perhaps have never been done. And what we've seen is that the area of Smithtown Pond, that 5-acre property, let's talk about that just a second. So we kind of push it aside and say, hey, let's build this pond or not build this pond. But you're looking at it perhaps a little differently than you should, if that's your viewpoint. This is an incredibly diverse ecosystem, this 5 acres, with all sorts of trees, many of which are full, and they absorb enormous amounts of water based upon their size and root system, right behind my house in a high water table area. And you're going to dig them all out, virtually all of those trees. The 90% of that property is going to be dug out, 90% of it. And no one talks about that. 800 trees were identified as being removed from that property, many of which are large mature trees with excellent root systems that take up hundreds of gallons or thousands of gallons of water each year that would go into a floodplain or become a flooding issue. Instead, they're absorbed by those natural systems, and there are high grasses. It's a beautiful, beautiful property if you haven't walked it, and it would make a wonderful preserve. And also it functions as your purpose, which is it's a local watershed which absorbs the water beautifully and treats it so that it's cleaned. It does everything right. So why not, are we not talking about what the trade-offs are, the cost benefits are of taking out 5 acres that actually protect my property and my neighbor's property and do the natural job of processing water safely and with quality, because you're going to lose that. And then what's the impact if you lose all that, which is indeed the plan now. So if you take that out and you dig these gigantic ponds in my backyard, you're going to actually prevent the water from being absorbed throughout that 5 acres because it's water table water. It's not rainwater driven. And where's that water going to go? That's a major problem. It's impermeable to the water table. If you seal that pond, which you most likely will, then that is a major problem as well. You're taking out an absorber and a processor of all that water, the hundreds and hundreds of gallons of water that come through that property during rain events and spring melt events. So the property itself is valuable. The property itself functions beautifully. If you look at it, there are actually springs in it, which make building ponds not a good idea. It's really remarkable that no one is considering the value and preciousness of these 5 acres and the risk of removing this wonderful absorber of water. All right, I'm getting to the end of this now. I do appreciate your patience with me. Let me cover just a couple other key points. Your policies and principles, I've cited them and listed them. They call for everything that we're not doing with this project. So your rules may allow you to look at the permitting technically and say, hey, it meets our technical rules standards for permitting, but it doesn't mean any of your principles, any of your policies, not one, because you're not preserving a natural area, you're not doing something locally, you're introducing something very mechanical into the process. You're not providing enough science to give us the measures that we need to be able to understand if there is a problem and where the source of the problem is and how the problem proceeds into your areas of concern. So we're violating your basic foundational principles by doing this without allowing citizens to have information, without having the science, and that's particularly been blocked from us. We can't find it because they removed it and will not share it with us or you, apparently, certainly with us. I don't know what you've had access to, but I would argue you don't have all the information you need to make these decisions because there are something close to 8 to 10 years of reports prior to. I do want everyone to know that I know that you guys have properly worked as a partner with the city of Sherwood in looking at these issues for quite a few years. So I realize you have done that. You provided advice to the city. I'm going to ask a question that I don't ask, that you're not going to be able to answer immediately, but I'll just put this question out since it's part of our concerns. City of Sherwood bought that property because they said that you would require facilities for rate and volume control as well as storage. Therefore, we bought the property. I have the document right here that says that. And I have some evidence that says you didn't say that to them directly in that way, where you basically instructed them to do that. So I would ask that you hold that as a question to be answered as I complete my comments here in just a few minutes. But that is an important factor because we were not informed that they were purchasing the property. I was not informed. I'm 600 feet from the property. I was not informed that they were going to purchase this property or for what purpose. I was never asked a question about it. I was told after the fact that they bought it and they're going to do X, Y, and Z to it. That's not the way to do this. That's actually illegal. Continuing on, reducing flows, lowering floodplains. There is a minimal amount of flood risk in this entire area, and local solutions can manage that. And if we find we're wrong in the future, we can still go ahead with something that would mitigate the issue. But for now, there is no proof or evidence that the flow rates are going to be controlled to the point where they'll reduce erosion, that they'll reduce sediment, because you've got these wonderful natural filters already in place throughout this entire ecosystem. There's no place where there is not a filter for the flow into Lake Minnetonka. You haven't looked at the source of pollution and contamination. That's an issue. You're supposed to work on quality water. Well, the biggest polluter in the city of Sherwood is the city of Sherwood. And I've given you evidence that they lied to us by saying they would not use systemic pesticides on public property. They have, and not only did they do that in large quantities, but they did it right in your watershed, and they did it right where there's protected wetlands. So you've got systemic pesticides flowing into the protected wetlands. The 3 that you've cited, all of those receive flow from those fields where those illegal pesticides were applied. And there also were applied illegally. That's illegal dumping. You've got rules, and the state has rules, and the federal government has rules about putting contaminated materials into a wastewater drain system. And so they've violated your own rules. They have potentially damaged your own wetlands. They're continuing to do so at this moment. And that contamination also involves our well. So I've got a well 600 feet from whatever you're considering for a pond. I have no idea whether I'm going to get contaminated sediment into my well system from this development and what the protections are for that. And I know there are springs on that property where that contamination can easily occur, and the contamination can easily go down well pipes and get beneath the protective layers of clay soils. So whoever wrote the comments that said, we're protected because we got this layer of clay. That's not only scientifically inaccurate, but it makes me upset to hear that came out of someone from your organization's writing. So no, contamination is a serious issue, and indeed contamination finds its way in a high water table area into everything. And we're all at risk if indeed that is allowed. So I think I'm getting to the point where I'm overstayed my my comments. I have many, many more. Let me just double check and see if there's anything big that I have missed, and then I'll turn it back to you for hopefully some discussion, which I would appreciate very much. I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Yelsey. We have staff, district engineer, legal counsel, I think representatives from Sherwood here who can respond to that. But first, let me ask if there are any other public members who wish to speak concerning this permit. Mr. Whisker, I'll leave it to you to manage the response.
Thank you, President White, and thank you, Mr. Yelsey, for taking the time to attend today, your work with staff leading up to the meeting, and your comments that have been entered into the public record. I think, President White, what I do is just start by cataloging categorically the areas of feedback that we received from Mr. Yelsey, and if it's okay with you, just help direct those lines of questioning to provide some information for the board as you then consider the permit. And off the top, what I heard where there were initial questions, procedural questions with regards to the watershed district's public notice process. Second, there are procedural questions, legal questions related to how the city has or has not complied with its obligations under Freedom of Information Act or data practice requests. Obviously, those fall largely outside of our authority, but we'll let Lewis Smith, legal counsel, weigh in on those. And then there were a host of questions or concerns raised about what I call the merits of the project on a water resource basis. And I think that we could step through, and between myself and Grace and Chris, we can talk about how regulations apply to the project. And as you mentioned, there's staff from the city of Sherwood here. So if there are questions about the project purpose from the city's perspective, they would be able to tackle those. And so I want to start at the top with public notice process. My understanding, Grace, is that our requirements are to send postcards out to properties within 600-foot radius, that we initially issued a notice and alerted Mr. Yelsey to the project. That's how he became aware and had dialogue with you. We did issue a second one, and that you've been in personal touch with Mr. Yelsey leading up to the meeting. So just, I wanted to check sort of yes or no on a procedural question that we followed our requirements for public notice.
Yes.
I did not receive the card.
I can provide the Word document that shows the language that would have been on the card. I would have used the same 600 feet mailing list. I put them in the mail before I left for the holidays.
What I can do is, if you allow me to.
Mr. Yelsey.
Yes.
I'd like to allow all the responses to come in before you weigh in.
All right.
I think my overriding point there would be that we use a set of mailing labels. Mr. Yelsey received the first notice. He's nodding. We use the same set of labels for the second notice. We're really only required to issue one notice for the project, not notice of meeting, but we do that as an extra sort of best practice. And I know Ms. Barlow has been in contact with Mr. Yelsey leading up to the meeting. That's why he's here. So I think that may be one of the lesser issues, and we could move on then to hear from Mr. Smith about Mr. Yelsey's comment regarding the city's obligations under Data Practice Act requests and how that relates or does not relate to the district.
Madam Chair, the city of Sherwood and the district, just like other public entities, are all subject to the Minnesota Data Practices Act. And that act does require that when there's a request for data, that the entity respond within a reasonable time. The district, though, is not in a position to enforce the requirements of the act with other entities like the city. So compliance with the Data Practices Act would be a matter between the requester and the city. The issue here before you is whether the information that's been submitted by the applicant meets the requirements of your rules. I'm assuming that if Mr. Yelsey had requests for data from the district, that he did receive the information he requested from us. So that's what I would say at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
And with regards to any formal data practice requests, Grace, have we received one? I know that there's a lot of correspondence in the packet, and as Mr. Yelsey pointed out at the beginning of the meeting, is appreciated, even if he doesn't agree on merit, that there's been free exchange of information and you've provided good professional service. But could you just speak to, have we received a formal data practice request that we would route through our DPA officer on staff and then coordinate with legal?
Nothing that would fall into that category, but every piece of submittal that I received from the city of Sherwood that was tagged as part of the final submittal would have gone online once I posted the board packet, and then I emailed as well.
Thank you. And then I may not capture everything with fine granular detail that Mr. Yelsey did, but there are a category of water resource issues ranging from clean water coming from drain tile upstream, there being in various locations, basins or upstream treatment that may reduce the need for water quality at this location. From his perspective, he spoke to the use of modeling within the practice of civil engineering for designing and permitting projects versus measured data. He spoke to his perspective on the cost benefit of the project. I heard, Mr. Yelsey, you also outline your perspective on the intrinsic value of the land in its current state. And towards the end there, you were talking about the systematic application of pesticides. And as Mr. Smith, legal counsel, pointed out, our job, or the board's job in this instance, is it's evaluating this permit and considering the permit tonight, is not to evaluate the project purpose, but rather to take the project as designed by landowners, in this case the city, and review that civil design against the regulations that we have established on record. And in this instance, you've heard from staff that the regulations that are triggered for this project that we've reviewed are erosion control, wetland protection, water body crossings, and stormwater management. And erosion control is simply to make sure that as construction happens, sediment isn't leaving the site. Wetland protection is a buffer provision, establishing setbacks and buffers. Water body crossings and structures is to look at dimensions and configurations of outlet control devices. And on a stormwater management basis, we're looking at this as a potential regional stormwater system for future projects and looking at volume, rate, and quality as modeled, and making sure that there's no downstream impact or exacerbating effects of rate and volume. And you've heard from staff and the civil engineer that there's a reduction in rates. So from the district's perspective, and as Mr. Yelsey mentioned during his comments, the project's evaluated against our rules and complies with those rules. And if there are questions about the purpose of the project, Andrew Buddy is here from the city of Sherwood, but I just wanted to provide that sort of categorical orientation for the board. And then President White, if there's questions, obviously at this point, we'll turn that back to you and the Board of Managers.
Thank you, Mr. Whisker. Did you want to add anything to the conversation, Mr. White?
I guess I would just be here for any specific questions that the board has.
All right, thank you. All right. Then I will, before going to deliberation, you may have a very brief statement, Mr. Yelsey.
Mr. Buddy has had 1 year plus to work on this project, and you're giving me 30 minutes, which I appreciate, but this is a complex issue and it's very important to us. It's a $3 million something project. I know you don't care about that in your obligation for rules, but here's my comments in my brief time that I have left. Number one, I'm looking right at your guiding principles, your policies. Every one of those says this is wrong. Every one of those, if you look at them, to take the 5 acres out without definitive scientific proof that there is a problem, B, that you're not going to exacerbate the problem, and C, that is in the best interest of the watershed in this area. You violated every one of those if you approve this permit as it stands. The issue with not having access to information is tantamount to denying your integrity, because here's what it says about you. You're going to collaborate with public and private partners to protect and improve land. How can you collaborate with me when I don't have?
Mr. Yelsey, would you bring your comments to a close? Summarize, please.
I didn't receive the report I requested from Grace, which is the submission by Mr. Buddy. Mr. Buddy has prohibited me from getting access to all of that information. You should not proceed until such time as we, the residents of Sherwood, get access to our own information. That's part of your principles and policies because you believe in participation by the public.
Thank you very much. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to, before we open it for discussion by the board, look for a motion to approve the permit with the listed conditions for the Army Corps of Engineer and maintenance agreement requirements. Is there a motion to approve the permit?
President White,
Yes, Mr. Whisker.
I'd asked Lewis Smith to speak to a third condition with regards to the plan being approved as a regional stormwater facility for consideration of future projects.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Madam President, given that the proposed facility is intended to serve as a regional stormwater management facility, and there are future projects that have been identified like the Strawberry Lane, we would recommend that one additional condition be added that would read as follows, and I can put the language in the chat. The city must apply to the district for a permit for the Strawberry Road improvements and any other future project intending to use the Smithtown Pond project facilities to meet compliance requirements for review in accordance with this approval.
Thank you. I will take that recommendation and see if there's a motion. Is there a motion to approve the permit with the 3 conditions, the 2 stated and the 3rd added by Mr. Smith or suggested?
Is that a motion just for discussion? Then also once that'll open up discussion after, you just want a motion?
It just puts it on the table for a discussion.
Just puts it on the table. Then I'll move for discussion purposes.
Thank you, Andrew Maxwell. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll
Olson.
second Loftus.
I heard Manager Olson first. I'll take his second. And now open it up for discussion and questions from the board.
I guess
Manager Maxwell has his hand up.
First question is, Mr. Yelsey, was there a public notification in the newspapers at all?
No, there was not. About
And
the
was there,
property,
did
no.
you ever receive a postcard at all for notification within so much feet?
I did not.
Did they classify that property as an outlot once so it could ever be built on again?
We've not rezoned the property as far as I know. I believe it's still single residence, single family residential.
Okay. I think I had another one too, but I'll think about it in a minute.
Perhaps it'll come back. Other questions?
My next question, I'm sorry, Ed,
Go ahead.
when is the next city council meeting for Sherwood?
They just had one on Monday, so it'll be 2 weeks from
2 weeks.
last Monday.
So, and what was the time frame to start this project? Do we know that from our staff?
Manager Maxwell, maybe Mr. Buddy could speak to the project schedule and schedule of any remaining city council meetings as it relates to this project.
Mr. Buddy.
All right.
Yes, thank you. The city is waiting to bid this project until we get the permit from you and the Army Corps of Engineers. We're not sure on the exact timing of when we're going to get the Army Corps of Engineer permit. We're hoping here within about a month. Then we would go out to bid, and we would probably leave about a year-long window for construction. So the work could happen over the course of the summer, the fall, or even the following winter. Ultimately, we want the project completed and ready to take stormwater from the future Strawberry Lane project by the spring of 2023.
Thank you. Anything else from managers? If not, I can move to the vote.
Manager Hejmati has a question. President White.
Manager Hejmati, please go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to hear what Chris, if Chris Meehan has anything to say, our district engineer.
Manager Hejmati, President White. Yeah, as we've looked at this project, we look at it in comparison to the district's regulations and proper design standards of how sizing of ponds, how water quality is evaluated, and the project has complied with all of that. The basis of that is thousands of studies that we've done over time, not only here in Minnesota, but throughout the nation, to understand how these different stormwater water resources systems work and the benefits that they provide. It's no different than putting a road together, understanding how you build a road. We understand how the water quality is in these types of systems and how it can be treated effectively as we go through it. So as we look through that, it's met the requirements that we look for with this. And then as we look at the flooding component of it, where they've addressed how the water flows through the system, they've identified a great spot for a regional solution that allows for them to mitigate the largest amount of flood potential there is in this area by being essentially efficient with the design and the sizing of the system. They've done, like a unique component of it is they've mentioned the actual sump pumps in a lot of the Sherwood Oaks neighborhood. They've moved that water so that it won't essentially back up into the system by separating the actual pipes, which is a great way to help protect those homes. I know as a house that has a sump pump that does back up, this is a very nice feature that the city is taking on to help alleviate. And that's why the water is outletting north of the trail versus south of the trail, which is what's caused its issues in the past. So to Manager Hejmati's components of it, they've done a good diligent job in identifying appropriate solution, identifying how they can maximize the benefits it provides, and then aligning it with the best design practices that go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Did I answer your question, Manager Hejmati?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thank you for asking it. Anything else from managers?
Can I ask a question on the Corps of Engineers? If you
Do.
said maybe by another month or something like that, what does the Corps of Engineers look at? Do they look at the public notification part too, or they just look at here's what they want to do?
If I may,
Mr. Bennett.
what we trigger with the Army Corps of Engineers is actually stream impacts to it. The stream that routes through Freeman Park and this Smithtown Ponds property is under the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineer, and we have some minor impacts to that fall within their nationwide permit. There's been a current pause on issuing any permits from what I heard based off of some pending litigation, and so the timing of it is in flux right now. That's what we trigger. That's why we trigger the Army Corps of Engineer on this one, is because of the stream impacts going through the site.
Is this the waters of the United States issue?
I don't know the exact details of which Army Corps permit, but
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Thank you.
President White, yes, that's correct.
That's it. Okay. We have had briefings on that. Any other questions from managers?
Are you trying to get this built with this project going so you can do the winter bidding for maybe a better price line for the bidding? Is that the city's goal?
Our
Buddy?
goal was to try and construct it this current winter season, but we're not going to be able to do that because of not having the permit with the Army Corps of Engineer. And so since we only need the pond to be online by the spring of 2023, that's why we're going to leave the window open for a contractor to either build it this summer or even next winter, because what they've told us is that's where you probably get the fairest pricing, is for
Nice.
them to do that as a winter project.
Right.
Are you ready to vote? Then calling for a vote on approving the permit, Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
Manager Sando, Manager Sando. I'll move on to Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
No.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye. The permit is approved. Thank you all. Our next item of business is election of board officers and appointment of committee assignments. And I'm going to add a liaison appointment in there. Election can be done by motion or nomination, individual offices, or a slate. Beginning with the office of president, are there motions or nominations?
I nominate President White.
Thank you. Are there other nominations? Are there other nominations? Then voting on election of President White, is there, let's see, Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Miller, I'm sorry, Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
Manager White votes aye. Moving to the office of Vice President, currently held by Manager Olson, is there a motion or nomination?
I'll move to President White that Manager Olson stay as Vice President.
Thank you. That was a motion. Is there a second?
Hejmati second.
Thank you, Manager Hejmati. Any discussion before voting? Then voting on Manager Olson as Vice President, Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye. Congratulations, Manager Olson. Moving next to Treasurer, currently held by Manager Loftus. Is there a motion or nomination?
So moved, Hejmati.
What is your motion, Manager Hejmati?
For Manager Loftus to be treasurer.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second, Maxwell.
Thank you, Manager Maxwell. Then moving to vote on electing Manager Loftus as treasurer, Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye. Congratulations, Manager Loftus, and thank you for continuing in that position. And then last and not least, the office of secretary, currently held by Manager Maxwell. Is there a motion or nomination?
This is Hejmati nominate Jean Maxwell to be
Thank you. Are
secretary.
there other nominations? Other nominations? Other nominations? Then voting for Manager Maxwell as continuous secretary, Manager Sando,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye as well. Congratulations, Manager Maxwell, and thank you for serving. The committee assignments are going to continue as they were last year, subject to board's approval. That would be Operations and Programs Committee with Manager Loftus as chair, Manager Olson, Manager Hejmati. And for Planning and Policy Committee, Manager Miller is chair, Manager Maxwell, and Manager Sando. Is there a motion to approve those committee appointments?
So moved, Olson.
Thank you, Manager Olson. Is there a second?
Hejmati second.
Thank you, Manager Hejmati. Any discussion on that? All right, then. Let's vote on that. Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye. Thank you, Manager Loftus, in absentia, Manager Miller, for continuing to chair those committees. The next thing I want to do here is to add Manager Miller as a liaison to the City of Minneapolis and Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. And we previously appointed Manager Hejmati and myself, but I'd like to have the board weigh in on that slate of all three. So I would like board approval for appointing Managers Hejmati and Miller and White as liaisons to the Minneapolis and MPRB. Is there a
I'll
motion
move.
to approve? Thank you,
I-
Manager
I'll-
Max.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Sando second.
Thank you, Manager Sando. Any questions before proceeding with the vote? Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye. Thank you very much. Then we have one last, I'm sorry, we have a board discussion item. Ms. Christopher, Ms. Moran, responsive program name.
Went here to share my screen.
Ms. Moran.
All right, can everyone see my full screen there?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right. Well, this evening, Becky, Christopher, I are in front of you regarding the responsive program name, following up from our December meeting. I will provide just a very brief background, and from there I will just re-ground us in the program intent, so purpose and goals, which of course flows into how we go about the name consideration process to date. From there, I will walk through the staff recommendation, and then there is the option for board action pending, any feedback or input from the board this evening. And so we are actually at a really exciting time right now in this process. Staff, we've already developed the policy direction, and now we're looking to engage our stakeholders regarding this program. And so we, in December, went forward and got the approval for the stakeholder engagement plan. And right now staff are finalizing the kickoff publication. That will be part of the soft rollout that was described in the stakeholder plan. And then so we can actually get to the fun part of initiating and engaging our stakeholders. And so with this kickoff publication, we are looking to put that external facing name for the program within this publication. And so just to re-ground us, the purpose for the program is just to provide support for public and private projects, right? They have to be well coordinated with the district. They have to align with our district goals and priorities. And then of course we had the 4 goals that for this program. So those kind of 4 buckets are improve water resources, and then improve the integration and early coordination with land use planning. So really closing that gap between land use and water planning and moving away from kind of that kind of traditional kind of lead engagement approach to one of early coordination and engagement with the district. Doing this while we still provide service and value to our communities, and of course, allowing the district to still maintain our focus and our focal areas, but still allowing us to be flexible and nimble to these opportunities. And so in terms of the name consideration process to date, staff initially kind of brainstormed just the list of keywords that could describe the program. And so with that, these kind of keywords then were vetted through district staff. Kind of based off of that feedback, staff then developed a range of name options. And so those list of name options then were returned back to the district staff. And then that's where we also vetted this with our external communication consultants, John and Tom. And that's where we landed and brought forward to the board on December 16th the Minnehaha Land and Water Partnership recommendation for the external name of the program. And at that meeting, we received feedback from the board. And so staff went back to the drawing boards, took that feedback in, re-reviewed those kind of key words of what really this program is trying to invoke and communicate with its external facing name. And in your board packet, based off of that, we had 3 recommendations that we further vetted with district staff. And we also communicated with our vetted with our city, a couple of our city partners. And now we are in front of you all this evening for walking through that. And so a couple things I do want to just kind of touch on based off of kind of feedback from our December meeting. We do recognize that kind of having a geography or kind of a focal reference such as Minnehaha or anything along those lines is just fairly redundant, because we do recognize, we will recognize this as MCWD's blank program. So we can kind of strip away that extra verbiage in that sense. And just to kind of give you a flavor of how we kind of went about landing on these recommendations, we kind of grouped keywords and kind of considered how those would play out in the title for the program. And just to give you a sense here, I kind of threw some up on the screen for you to see. Some of them like integrated, regional, implementation, they're just too technical. If we're really thinking about our audience, both our private developers and then our cities and counties. And while it has a lot of meaning to us, we can provide that detail and context with the program. We also don't need to have a lengthy, very technical name for the program. In other cases, some were just too specific or just too vague. Like a good example to point out is fund came up during our December meeting. And in terms of fund, kind of 2 parts I want to touch on with that piece is we do believe this is a program in terms of fund, it kind of has the image of a pot of money available. And we're really trying to shift people to come to us early and engage and partner with us through that technical assistance. So funding is just kind of too specific. That's only one of the services we provide. Another one I think that's worthwhile pointing out is water quality. Right now, that is kind of how we are looking at the cost benefit and the resource needs through our criterion evaluation process with the program. But that's because we have goals set through our TMDLs. As we talked about in committee with climate, as we get our 2D model up and running, we can ultimately have volume goals potentially also be incorporated into the program. So we also don't want to narrow the program in with a word such as water quality. And kind of out of this name consideration process, partnership really is the one that stood out, as well as that land and water and community, because it really just speaks to the district's mission and also the program's purpose. And so in your packets, we had 3 recommendations. And this week we further again, brought these to staff as well as spoke to a handful of our city partners just to get their take on this as well. So the first one is MCWD's Community Partnership CP program. In terms of the term community, the feedback we heard is, while it can have this very broad feeling to it, right? Community is a very broad, open sense. At the same time, you're also getting this feeling of very hyper localized. If you think about some of the other grants that have communities in their name, they're usually residentially focused, neighborhood focused, or more kind of small parcels such as schools, places of faith. And so we want to make sure that we're considering that that it also has this political kind of boundary, right? A community or a city has a political boundary, and it can't flow past that boundary. And so that's some of the considerations that went into community. I think the last point I want to touch on that piece is with our outreach department. As we've kind of shifted away for some of these more kind of residential community focus, we want to be sensitive to the fact that, currently we've kind of shifted away from those programs, and maybe adding in community might kind of muddy the waters a little. The other second one that was in your memo was Water Partner. So MCWD's Water Partner WP program. This one is really just trying to convey we are your water partners and just being very clear and simple about it. Some of the feedback we did hear is regarding, and more has a drinking water connotation that comes to mind for some folks. And then the third one is land and water partnership, which is very close to the original one that was provided in December. So MCWD's Land and Water Partnership, LWP program. And so with that, based off of those three, the staff recommendation is MCWD's Land and Water Partnership Program is where the main recommendation is. And so with that, I just kind of a couple questions. A, does the board have any input or feedback on the recommended name, Land and Water Partnership? And then if so, we can kind of speak to those. And then kind of depending where the board lands this evening, we can see if the board's comfortable proceeding with that recommended name and has that option to move for an action. So I will hand it over there to President White.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moran. Board, what would you think about Land and Water Partnership or the other names?
Steve Sando,
Yes.
studied these this afternoon and listed them all. And I came up with Land and Water Partnership. That's so I'd vote for that.
You like that one, great.
Yes.
Other comments from managers?
I like the land and water partnership one too also, but, and I know she was talking about a community, would it make sense to put community land and partnership? The land and water partnership in front of it, or is that too long?
Thank you, Manager Maxwell. I think from just my initial reaction, I think we're trying again, kind of keep it as very short and simple as
Right.
possible, and then have
yeah.
the context in the description.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I was just wondering if that was even a thought maybe, but I realized it was awful long and a lot of words and
Yes.
everything else. So.
Yes,
It's
thank
good
you.
to throw it out and discuss
Mhm.
it though. Make sure we don't
Exactly.
leave anything behind. Other
I
managers?
was hoping it really would have spelled a word, but it didn't.
We tried
plan.
very hard to have a very cool acronym or for a word.
I didn't make it.
Any comments from other managers?
Yeah, this is Arun.
Yes.
I really like the way this has been thought through and all the reasons that it will make a lot of sense to me. And so land and water partnership is, I'm very comfortable with that.
Thank you. Let's see, Manager Olson and Manager Loftus haven't spoken. Do you have anything you'd like to weigh in with?
President White, I was just going to comment that I like the simplicity and the word partnership, and I support the staff's recommendation.
Thank you. What do you
I do
think,
as well.
Manager Olson?
I support it.
Okay. I remember how much thought and care we gave to redrafting our mission, vision, goal statements before we came up with our most recent comprehensive plan. And we made sure that we wove land and water together throughout those statements. And so I think this is reflective of that, and I'm very happy with it as well. So it sounds as if we could go ahead and vote to accept this name. No one objects? We can go ahead. All right, then, is there a motion that we adopt the title Land and Water, MCDA's Land and Water Partnership Program for what we have heretofore called the Responsive Program?
This is
Sando. Excuse me, go ahead.
Motion, Manager Sando, is there a second?
Hejmati second.
Thank you, Manager Hejmati. Any further discussion? Then let's vote on this motion. Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye as well. Thank you very much, Ms. Christopher and Ms. Moran, for working us through to this nice conclusion. Appreciate it. Last item on our agenda is the administrator's report. Mr. Wister.
Thank you, President White. Last, but as they say, definitely not least. And I know it's everybody's favorite part of the agenda after a very long meeting. I have 2 to 3 quick updates. I want to keep information flowing about 325 Blake Road. Some simple information coming out to complement written updates that I know the project team provided everybody on staff about the status of land entitlement through the city's plan review process. The next milestone for us is the district's going to be hosting a virtual public meeting on January 24th. It'll be 6:30 to 8 p.m. And that'll be to preview 60% designs and to gather feedback on site amenities and interpretive themes. So really focused on the district's component of the project. Obviously, the input that we're going to get is going to help refine those 60% designs, which would be tentatively brought in front of the board for consideration at the second meeting in February. So this is a key marker for us to push information back out to the public, get feedback, keep the design moving towards 60%, and then you would see that at the end of February. The project team did check in with the design liaisons this last week. I'm in a time warp. January 5th, I think that was last week, to discuss design direction for the Gateway parcel and the Lake Street parcel. So that the triangular parcels that are sort of at the north and northeast corner of the project. President White did a good job covering commissioner meetings. I just put a finer point on it that we met with Commissioner Anderson, Lundy, Latondras. The information's flowing really well. We learned a lot about the county's priorities and the funding that they've been putting into housing, infrastructure, and COVID relief through the American Rescue Plan, as well as where they're anticipating dollars flowing moving forward. It sounds like there's significant amount of investment in affordable housing beyond what they're normally putting into their base programs due to those outside funds. I think upwards of 40 million. And we've been encouraged to make sure that Alatus and the city of Hopkins are really making the right connections with HRA to pursue those funds. So it's been a good way to get advice, and the commissioners that we've spoken to so far seem really supportive of the big data approach to climate action. A lot of constructive feedback there, and are really excited to see 325 at the critical junction point that it's at now. And we also gave a few of them heads up about the policy development we'll be doing with communities for the land and water partnership. We told them it was the responsive model, so they'll get the new name when we start rolling it out. And then we're scheduling the rest of them. I think most of them are on the books, and Manager Olson's been helpful in reaching out and reestablishing a 2022 connection with some of the Carver County commissioners. So those are in the works, and I'll keep reporting back. The last thing that I wanted to mention is everybody's least favorite topic, COVID-19. Just a quick snapshot of data here that's probably going to be reinforced by everybody's anecdotal experience personally or professionally. There's a 76% jump in new cases of COVID across the state in the last 14 days. There's almost 2,000 new cases daily right now in Hennepin County. As we've been watching what's happening on the landscape, we've seen cities taking back up consideration of mask mandates, vaccine passport approach in Minneapolis and St. Paul for restaurants that are licensed by the city. And we've seen communities going back towards digital meetings. Ones that have been in person are now moving digital. I think more close to home, we've had a number of cases on staff. Luckily, nobody's gotten terribly sick, but people have been catching it, testing positive and getting sick over the last month. So we've also had a number of exposures. So people that have had close contact and then had to jump through protocol of how they're working hybrid or testing. And we have a number of staff right now that are sharing my situation where they're living with folks who are tested positive for COVID. So it's out there, it's in the community, and it's obviously fairly rampant right now. Luckily for all of our staff, and I think the board too, the vaccines have been keeping people safe, and we haven't been having terrible illness. I wanted to note that earlier in 2021, the board approved a map essentially of how the district staff would return to work. Given the current situation and what we're seeing at a staff level, I did speak to President White just today before the meeting about a recommendation I'd like to make to the board this evening to authorize me to close our office to the public on a temporary basis, just for the next 10 business days. That would allow us then to encourage staff to work remotely, curb the spread across staff, and minimize any disruptions that we have. I mean, it's just a logistical bunch of hoops that we have to jump through every time somebody's testing positive. And then we'd bring back reconsideration on the 27th, just looking at where we stand. And at that time, just to plant a seed, we may want to consider adjusted office hours. One thing that we've seen over the last 2 years, year and a half, however long it's been, is industry and people's behaviors are changing rapidly. Our permitting portal right now is up and running and online, and people are using it versus coming in to do hard copy permits. So we'll have some data on this, but the volume of walk-in traffic for people off the street trying to get information or access us for permitting services is near zero on a week-to-week or month-to-month basis. So we may want to just consider doing what other businesses, agencies have done and just provide more focused office hours for people that do want to come in and get service, just to keep balancing how we're managing hybrid, remote and in-office time. So I wanted to give a quick snapshot of where things stand statewide, county, what we're experiencing at a staff level, being in and out of the office and hybrid. And then, like I said, my recommendation would be that the board grant me the authority to close the office to the public just for the next 10 days. As I think a common sense immediate measure to curb the transmission at a staff level.
Mr. Whisker, would the desire be to close the office for 10 business days, subject to specific staff coming in to meet specific people if necessary during that time, or did you mean after?
Well, could you say that again? I got a little bit confused about the last part of your question there, President White.
You had said something about targeting people to come into the office if they had to for a specific purpose, or did you mean to
my recommendation is simply that right now myself, and I can't go to the office because I live with kids that have it, and permitting are really the ones keeping the doors open. And we're having staff across all programs test positive or be exposed at home. And so my recommendation is simply that we close the building to public access so that I can encourage more people to work remotely and not have to keep coming in, to open the building for and expose each other in an instance where we're just not seeing a lot of walk-in traffic, and do that for 10 days because we do have a number of people that have tested positive recently, and we're seeing more people at home testing positive, and then revisit where we stand with the board on the 27th.
Okay. Let's have managers weigh in if they have reaction to this.
My record, is it 10 business days, James, or is it just 10 days counting? I mean, I would think you do during the week 10 days, so it'd be 2 weeks plus the weekend, so it'd really be a little more than that. But
It would be a Monday, Friday.
yeah, that's. I mean that
I just counted out the days until our next meeting, which would be that. So I mean, however we want to frame this, and this came together rather quickly before the meeting, but that we would close the office and reconsider on the 27th, which is 10 days from now.
Sounds good. Oh, okay, all right. And then the other question is, how are you gonna put it on the website notification that's gonna be closed?
Yeah, I think if the board's comfortable, the authorization would come with the obvious, but we could make an explicit statement that the administrator take all obvious and necessary measures to implement the directions. So that would include noticing it on the website, putting a sign on the door, and all of those sorts of things. But like I said, in like the last 2 weeks alone, we've had one person come in, and they probably called ahead of time. We just don't have people coming in off the street to do business anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just want, I just want to make sure somehow we notify everybody that that basically is looking at it, but it's gonna be.
Yeah,
on the
we'd
web,
push
but
it through the
then-
website and then give staff a stock email to push out through their channels and specifically through permitting. But like I said, all the permit is the major source of walk-in traffic, if there is any, and almost all of that's moved online now.
Okay, and I have no problem going to the 27th. I just want to make sure I'd rather do it business days, not just come in the weekends, but if we can go till the next meeting, that's fine.
Business days. Anything else from managers? I see Manager Sando and Manager Hejmati are unmuted. Does that mean you want to speak?
No,
Yeah,
but
Looking for signs.
I'll just make a comment. I think it's very prudent to the 27th.
Thank you, Manager Sando.
I support that.
Manager Hejmati. Does anyone have any problem with that? Then let's endorse this and direct Mr. Whisker to close the office for the 10 business days, is taking all necessary steps to ensure that that's done.
Speaking with Lewis very briefly before the meeting, it would be helpful just as a matter of process and record, since it is a, you've voted on this before, to maybe take that as a motion that you vote on, President White.
So moved, Olson.
Hejmati second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Then voting on that direction, Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye as well. Prudent is right. Prudent is right. Do you have anything else for us, Mr. Whisker?
That's it. Sorry to end on what might feel like a low note. Maybe I should have done that in reverse order, but I would just say, like, we're really excited that Kayla is with us. We've got a great team at district with the district staff, and we're chugging along on work and really excited about 2022 and everything that is out in front of us. I think it's going to be a great year. So we can set COVID aside and stay optimistic and happy.
Let's do that. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody, be safe.
Good night,
It's been
everyone.
great to see you
Have a
all.
great night, everybody. Good to see you.
Thanks, everybody. Great meeting.
Good night.